On this episode of Eager to Know, the impact of not being exposed to the arts as a child and what my guest says is the best thing you can do to be a good mother. We all have a creative part of our brain, whether we use it or not, for generating new ideas, problem solving, and just viewing ourselves in this world. I am Ricky McGeckran, an artist living in Chicago, and I am eager to know and share with you all how people of a creative leaning have brought this way of thinking to the forefront and how it has shifted outcomes. Diana Leviton Gondek is a visual artist whose childhood was filled with all forms of creative activities and creative people. Trips to museums, trips to the theater, and family friends who were artists, musicians, and writers. We discuss her journey and what her background in art taught her about being a mom. Diana says she feels most comfortable when she's surrounded by her art.
My art is me. So you take away my art, you're taking away part of me. That's how I sometimes feel in terms of, I've noticed myself, even at somebody else's show, and all of a sudden there's this kind of insecurity. And it's not so much that I'm of a jealousy or any of that sort. It's just like, where are my paintings? I need them next to me too. So I sometimes feel that.
So when did you start producing artwork?
As a child. I mean, I've always been very involved in the arts. I've come from a very artistic family in literature and the arts and theater, and it's always around us. It was always, it was a joy to do. That was our outing. Let's go to the Art Institute. Let's go to a play. So it was just the natural thing for me.
So when you were producing artwork as a kid, did you have the same feeling like when it was around you, that was a feeling of like warmth and safety back then?
I didn't have them on my wall. I believe I had like a poster of Paul Newman. So I didn't really, it wasn't until I got my own space, my own studio, that I put my artwork up. Even in my home, I really just have some few pieces from college, from my watercolor days. I don't have my oils there. I have my friends' work up and some other artists I've known. But it's, in terms of just that real security, is when I feel as soon as I walk into my studio and have that art, they're there. It's all my feelings are there for the past couple of years. And it's just a very warm feeling.
Nice. Now, so I would assume that is the optimal way for you to produce artwork, is to be in that space where you're feeling warm and comfortable.
Yes. I do have two studios. I have my studio in Chicago at the Joby Art Center. I also have one at home. I have a home studio. In terms of the weather or whatever, I'm not feeling good, I can also work at home. But I feel the comfort there too, and I have my artwork around there as well.
So your family was the family that went to art museums, and was that like a primary focus of what you did as a family together?
Yes, and also even the family friends were into music. Some dear friends of my parents were jazz and performers in jazz. And so we would have these parties, Christmas parties, and there were just these gigs. So we'd come downstairs and these were professional artists, just all performing. I was this little kid listening to this. So it was always around. Then there were artist friends. We'd go visit and come to our house too. And it even went on to politics. It was a very fascinating childhood.
Diana was a fine art major at Northern Illinois University and raised 2 children while actively engaging with the art world. She was an art director at Northwestern University and eventually taught art awareness at Evanston Public Schools. Okay, so tell me about that.
That was fun. It was kind of getting it out again and speaking in front of, you can speak in front of kids, you can pretty much speak in front of everyone, get them involved. And so I did this when I think my son was in like 4th grade. I started with him. And then my daughter was coming into kindergarten. He was going to the junior high, and I started with her since kindergarten. So I did 6 years of art awareness. And that's where you would talk about an artist or a couple artists, and then you would have a project that dealt with what the subject matter of your lecture.
So this was who were the students? Like, how old would they be?
Oh, I did kindergarten through 5th grade.
Oh, so it's like little it's like
ones.
It's youngins.
Yeah, very young.
So what is that like, teaching? Because this comes up a lot on the podcast, is children's relationship to art is very different than adults because children are much more open to it. They're fearless and they just jump right in. Would you agree with that statement?
Definitely. But you also see different personalities where some, they're very more timid and didn't know what to do and what are the rules. So when you see someone just go right ahead and start doing the artwork, it definitely helped in learning how to deal with people, even coming into my studio space now during openings, how to engage conversation and to read them and to understand what their interests were.
So I think that kids develop into their full selves fairly early.
Mm-hmm.
I went to kindergarten with some of the same people that I graduated high school with because we never moved. So when I look back at some of these kids, they were like fully developed in their personalities and in who they are back then.
Right.
Do you think that comes out artistically as kids? Do you think kids sort of are somewhat developed in how they would approach art and how they would express themselves in art? And that would sort of carry through their adulthood?
I would think so. I think art is part of your personality. If you're slightly rebellious, that would be, not following all the rules. And that we also had theater in Evanston in those days. I mean, starting, I think it was in kindergarten, but we had our own little theater. So, that was brought in too. So that there's so much imagination and different forms of artwork, not just one thing. And I'm sorry to see a lot of that's not there anymore for this generation coming up.
Yeah. So there would be also, I assume there would also be music.
Yes.
Visual arts as well as theater. And so that would be a way that kids would be able to express different parts of their personality. So what do you think happens if that's not available? Because certainly some places those things aren't available. Do you have any opinion on that?
I think you're getting people who are limited in what their scope of their view is. You have to, I'm even raising my kids. I wanted Renaissance children. I wanted kids who were involved in music and literature and in the arts and in math and in everything. Mm-hmm. I wanted to introduce everything to them, but not force it on them. And it was their decision what to do with that. I think when you don't give that to a child, I think you're getting a world of limited people. They're not as they're not going to enjoy the real world out there because there's only a little bit that they understand and want to know about.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Because I think that certainly, like, I'm a science and math guy, so I loved science and math. But I think that engaging in things such as music, which I didn't really do a lot of, but sports, which I did do, and art, which I did do, that kind of configures your brain in a way that affects how you are as an adult. It doesn't mean that you are going to become an artist, but it affects how you view problems, how you view the world, even if you're an accountant. I think that if you have a background in all of those things that you just described, I think that it's probably going to affect you in a positive way, no matter what your role is.
And your brain too. I think just even in terms of, music helps you in reading. There's, things. It's a positive thing in your own education. The core education, bringing the arts in there. It's going to help with that. And luckily, my kids did end up going into music. I had a rock drummer, who ended up being a Purdue graduate. So that's kind of the sideline right now. But he also did lacrosse and played at Purdue. And my daughter is an oboist and actually is right now continued on with her music and is a music therapist at Musicordia in Chicago.
So you had this childhood that strongly encouraged engagement with the arts. Then you were in an early career, it sounds like, in the arts in the school system, and now you are an artist. So tell me about your current work that you do.
Currently I do oil. Well, I love oil. That's my main medium.
Me too.
I love the smell. Just love everything. Love it that it gives me time to think.
Oh yeah, it's the best.
Yeah, and
It's
I,
the best.
I try usually to work on one painting at a time, and it kind of engulfs me. I sleep on that painting. I think about it. Like if I have I look at it as little puzzles, and what does it need? What can I do? And
Yes.
it just kind of, I live through that night with it in a dream, and I can wake up and I know what it needs.
It's problem solving.
Yes, exactly.
It's problem solving.
Exactly. I also, in some of my travels and some of the shows, I took some pictures here and there, and I've been using those in more assemblage art, and I've been doing that lately too, just for fun. I like to do things to a point where I feel like, okay, when it starts getting repetitive, like, okay, another body on body painting, what's going to be this time? I know it's time to
move on.
Yeah, to move on and to try something that's, challenging and to learn from again.
Okay.
And then it all comes together. I mean, all these little pieces from my earlier work to now, these are all still building in my voice.
Okay. I think that's one of the things that I'm most grateful for, that I am a painter, is the fact that you can always reinvent it, and it never runs out of being a challenge. It's kind of like yoga. Do you do yoga?
A little bit.
Okay, so yoga is one of these things where you're never gonna master it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's always something new to learn. So even when I'm like old and I'm like 80 years old, like I will still have new things that I can learn and push myself. And art's kind of the same way, because you can always challenge yourself in a new way and reconfigure it so that it's something new and challenging. Now, is it difficult for you to find new things to work on, inspire you? Or is it the reverse, where you have more than you can accomplish? You have tons of inspiration and limited time.
I think it's something in between. I have things in life sometimes take over, unfortunately, and we get busy and taking care of things. But in general, it's more, what was the original question?
So what I'm trying to figure out is there's the idea that you have all of this time and artistic energy, but you don't have enough inspiration.
Okay.
And then the flip side of it is you're inspired by everything you see, but I only have 24 hours a day to express it.
Right.
Which side of it would you say?
I would say I was more on, I'm always inspired. I always have something in my mind that I want to work. I'm working. I always have to be working on something. I can't have absolutely nothing going on, a piece that I'm working on. I feel lost if I don't have something there that I'm thinking about, I'm working on. It's funny because it gives me a piece, and then all of a sudden that piece is kind of gone. And I'm like, yeeks, what's next, But so I always, but sometimes even near the end of a project I'm working on, I come up with the next thing I want to do. So it's a continuing.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So whether I'm working on a particular painting, I always know what's next. Or if I'm working on a collection of paintings, I always know what my next either collection is or my next project. Because it may be a project that is not painting, but there's always something in that developmental part of the developmental phase that's sort of brewing in the background.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I know that you do watercolor, so tell me a little bit about that. I like watercolor for certain aspects. I think it's lovely when people do it and the paintings are great. Personally, I think it's just so challenging.
Right.
What's your thought on it?
Well, actually, my watercolor days have sort of ended when I went back to when I found oil. And I had done one large commission piece in watercolor. But after that, I think oil just kind of took over. But my days in watercolor were wonderful. That was my emphasis in college. And I had a wonderful teacher, Wynne Jones. And he just really opened my mind to everything in terms of technique. And I still think if you can somewhat conquer watercolor, you can do any medium. You oil, acrylic, it's, of course, I always tell people that the number one thing is learn how to draw. That's the number one thing.
Yes.
But I do think, you can skip around and not have that watercolor training and be an incredible artist. But I think for those who do get that, it opens doors for you quickly to other mediums.
Yeah, I remember when I started painting, I was like, acrylic or oil, what should I do? And I don't know, I think the people at Blick told me to start with acrylic, so I did. And then, which was fine, so I did it for a couple of years. And then I was out at a bar in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I just started talking to someone who was an artist, and he just convinced me. This was in 2012. I posted it on Facebook that this guy like convinced me to do oil, and I actually went to the art store in Brattleboro and bought all the oil stuff and just tried it. And I was intimidated by oil, but I think it's actually the easiest medium because it is so forgiving. You know, there's some things you have to get used to with using like the linseed oil and the terpenoid or turpentine. You know, they're like mechanical things that you have to deal with. But I think it's easier because it's so forgiving. It doesn't dry. So you have plenty of time. You know, when you're in acrylic, I feel like there's a timer because you have like 10 minutes and it's dry. And it's constantly changing. You know, every minute it's getting more and more solid. And it's really, I think it's difficult.
Yeah, I think it really is how you go to work. I think some people think oil's too slow for them. You know, oh, I've got to let it dry and if I do another layer, you know, blah blah blah, you know, and they're the people that really need to be working acrylic. But definitely that time is it's just such a treat to have that, and like waking up the next day and going, ooh, I don't know, I didn't do his eye right, and then I can kind of just easily play with it and correct it. I had done horses for the city of Chicago. And when I was first asked, I'm thinking, oh, I really want to do oil for these horses because that's what I really love to work with. And I was told, just don't do it. You know, the chemicals to set it, it's just not worth it. And it's very difficult. So I did the 3 horses for the city. I did those for Horses of Honor. I did those in acrylic.
Okay.
Which is very fast.
Yeah. So you mentioned drawing. So I took a class in at the Florence Academy of Art, and we started it was like a workshop, so it was like 6 weeks. It wasn't super extensive, but we started in drawing, and then it sort of evolved into painting, and it definitely solidified the relationship between drawing and painting for me, and sculpture, quite frankly. Like the 3 kind of work together. Right. So. You know, and I always, when people talk to me about wanting to be a visual artist, I'm always encouraging them drawing because, you know, it's something that you can do every day. So rather than, you know, I tell people every morning when you get up, rather than reading the news on your phone or on your computer, pull out your sketchbook and draw your coffee cup like every day. If you do that every day in 30 days, you're going to improve your drawing skills. Right. How did you start with drawing?
I learned sort of, I think maybe it was how I see things. I learned there's a trick to it. It's as simple as looking at life and putting a tracing paper over life and drawing it. It's not what we know, it's what we see. It's that simple. That's how you draw. I know how your face is and your shape, but that's not what I would draw. I would draw just what I see, not what I know. And I think when it comes to painting, then you can do both. That's fun too. I think once you learn the trick of and the skill of drawing, then bring in the painting, bring in your thoughts, bring in your heart, bring in what you're trying to say.
But there's a foundational part of it, which is about shapes and value, which is what you're talking about. Yes. So I talked to the artist Robert Brzezinski about this, and it's basically what you were just saying, is when you are drawing, it isn't really painting. Like when you see a ball on a floor, you would think to draw that as a circle, but it isn't necessarily really a circle, because what you would be drawing the dark parts and the light parts and the shadow and the part behind it. So it's actually shapes. And none of those shapes are a perfect circle. They're different types of shapes. So it is, you have to change the way you view the world.
Right. Foreshortening. I mean, learning how to do that, learning how, to draw some of these, angles that, just your mind can't understand. You see people who aren't trained and they can't draw what they see. They can only draw what they know.
Yeah. Do you think that's the biggest part of teaching someone? Because I think that drawing is foundational to visual arts. And do you think that's like the key to like the thing that you have to break people down is to draw in shapes and what you're actually seeing as opposed to...
Yeah. I think learning how to draw is incredibly important for becoming an artist. But that can't, there are people who just go by that, and that's all they do is just, realism and blah, blah, blah. It's something else to bring in your mind to another level too. Like, okay, I've got that down. Now what's next? How can I go from there? How can I make this piece say something I wanted to say? How can I go to this next level of creativity?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So there's kind of like the foundations, which are the mechanics.
Correct.
So it's about composition, value, hue, chroma, all of the things that we associate with paint. But then there's the actual creativity part of it, which is what you were saying at the very beginning of the podcast about all of these paintings around you are you. So they're more than just executions of shapes and values. It's actually you. Right. So that's kind of the other whole part of it.
Yeah, I think you have to trust yourself too. I mean, I took color class. I know these things. But when I'm doing a painting, I'm not referring to that. I'm just going by my visual thoughts at that point. I'm not thinking, okay, I know, this color goes with this color, and what hue and all that. I don't do that. I'm just going with the flow of my creativity.
Okay. So this reminds me, I had a conversation with this woman named Allie Pleiter, who she's a writer, and she was talking about her experience in theater, and she said something that kind of in my brain mapped to what we're just discussing. And she talked about how when you're writing a story or a play, that the actual writing part of it, that's just the mechanics. It's the storytelling.
Oh, yes.
That's the creativity, and like that's the talent. And it's kind of like what we're talking about, like the mechanics, the actual drawing, and knowing all of the how to mix paint and how to make different hues and values and colors and saturations. That's kind of the mechanics. That's the equivalent of the writing. But, expressing yourself, that's the storytelling. And I know on your website, you talk about your paintings being stories.
Right. Yes, definitely. And even especially my earlier series, my transparency series, those I would say, you say those are like little one-act plays because they were just little stories inside themselves. My paintings seem simple, and yet there's a lot going on in them. And you might just have a mother and two children looking at their phones, but there's something else beyond that. So
thinking about your pieces of artwork as stories, do you know the story ahead of time? Does it evolve as you're creating the painting? Tell me a little bit about that process.
Sometimes I know what I know what I want to say. I have a later piece that I had done, and dealing with a lot of things that happened in politics that were bothering me. I wanted to express my thought in my artwork. And there was a beautiful family portrait of parents from Mexico and the grandchildren. And I know what I wanted to say. I wanted to say what's important and what wasn't important. And it's called Family Wall, because what's important is a family wall. That's the importance. And then, so I knew what I wanted to do immediately. But slowly things like color wise, how did I want to use colors? I ended up using the colors only of the flag of the United States and the flag of Mexico and other colors. So I had the idea, but it just kind of kept building. And as I said, what I do is just one painting if I can at a time. So it gives me time to think and to put in these new thoughts into my painting.
So how do you know when a painting is done?
This sounds very corny, but kind of tells me just you're done. This is it. So, I just sense that it's where it should be. I feel the aesthetics of that I wanted to say are done. And sometimes even I'll start saying, what's that next project? I know that new one. I really want to do that one now. This one, is completed.
Yeah. So you know when it's almost done when you start thinking about the next one. I know for me it happens very quickly, and sometimes it's unexpected. So I had a painting that I finished a couple days ago, and I didn't realize I was going to finish it that morning. And I worked on it for about 2 hours, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, it's done.
Yeah.
Like it happened so quickly and unexpectedly.
And I think with oil, you get that, I guess with any medium, you would have the option to see that, but especially with oil, because it is such a slow process that it really gives you time to think, okay, I think we're getting to the end. All right, this is the end. And I can just walk in the morning and see the painting and go, yeah, I learned that's very important from schools. Take that break. Don't be constantly painting. You need that break away from it and then to look at it with new eyes again.
Yeah, I would agree. I know that coming back the next morning, a painting looks completely different than when you left it. Usually for the better, because usually you're in the middle of it and you're like, God, and then you come back the next morning and you're like, oh, wow, actually
it's working.
It's
great. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. There have been times I've left studio. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And other times I go, this is so good. So yeah, it's like knowing when it's saying what you want it to say.
So I've always thought about the painting process as problem solving.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely. It's as I said earlier, it's a puzzle. It's putting pieces together. Because you're on it's a blank canvas, and all of a sudden you're where do you go? What's the next thing? And you can't just randomly do things. You really have to think it through. Think in the color. Think of that next line. The thickness of the line. Everything's important.
Is that ever stressful?
It's a good stress because I know I'll come to a solution. I don't think I've ever done a painting and just given up and ripped it up and said, that's it, I'm done. I've always solved. There's been, maybe there's one I know one that I should have, but I really try to figure it out. I just kind of make myself figure it out. And a lot of times I start to without sketching separately than on the canvas. I want to be everything on the canvas. I'll sketch on the canvas directly, but I won't sketch on a piece of paper beforehand.
So you think that with enough time and focus, you can solve whatever problem is presented to you?
Yes, I think so. And I think usually, there is that timeline of the next piece that you want to get to, and that's sort of a built-in timeline. If you don't have that as a commission piece that needs to be done soon, too.
So what has your background in art taught you about being a mom?
I'm not a very patient person, so that's it's helped me a little bit with that, I think. It also, I think it's helped me keep my own self-awareness. It's helped me to remember who I am. I've never been one. I'm a very loving mom, but I think the best thing you can do is to be a happy person, to be a good mother. And so I think, you do put yourself first. Sometimes it's okay. You don't always, I remember once someone said you don't always have to give your kids the best apples. Once in a while you can have that best apple. It's okay. You're not a bad mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense that, because it's kind of like going to the gym and running. like, because when you go to the gym and you're running, like, really no one else is benefiting. No one else is going to benefit from that but you, but it's going to make you a better person.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, I sort of see a little bit of an equivalent with producing art. You know, I mean, I guess the people that would receive your art would benefit from it, but really it's something that is for you, but it's going to make you a better person. Or in your case, it sounds like it would make you a better mom. Yeah.
Well, I think we're always, I think the whole point of life is to better yourself in the arts and in your knowledge of literature and in your kindness and everything. And it's when you stop doing that, it's, you're missing the whole point of life. And I think in even carrying that on and for me, into my children, I see them as better human beings than I am. Not that I'm a bad human being, but that's my purpose, was to help guide them so they could be the best they can be.
So can you tell people that are listening a couple things, pieces of advice for them to be more creative? In whatever they do. They may be artists, right. They may be lawyers.
Travel as much as you can, I would say that. Open your mind to meeting all sorts of people, not just ones who agree with you in life. Give yourself moments to put down your electronic devices and look at the world. Give yourself a moment to think. Whatever helps you to do that. If it's a walk, if it's a run, let your mind wander too at times, just sitting there and doing nothing. I think we don't give ourselves a chance to do that much anymore. We fill every moment with something, and it's nice to let the creative part come out in those moments.
You had mentioned before the podcast that you took a 13-mile walk. Did you bring your iPhone with you?
Yeah, I finished, and as I stated to you, I finished the M Train from Patti Smith. So yeah, because
I'm always telling people, go for a walk and leave your phone behind. No music, just listen to the birds and the wind.
I know. I'm not what I just said. I'm not. I do think you should have that time to yourself, but some things, like a 13-mile walk, you need a little help. So that Patty helped me through that one. So, and then a lot of times when I also work out, and with that, it's more music at that time. I need that stimulation for that.
Do you listen to music when you paint?
Yeah, I used to do it all the time, and then we got a new president. I've been listening to a lot of radio, a lot of NPR lately, but it kind of stopped when we got our new president. I stopped listening to music as I painted. Before that, I was always listening to music.
All right. Now, I need to look at your paintings before you're the president and after.
Well, the funny thing,
we can see how they've changed.
As I said earlier, I had the drumming son and then the oboist daughter. And the drummer had introduced me to alternative rock, which I always liked. Anyway, as when times changed, I was never into disco. I was like, well, no, give me something else. And so there have been times when I'm painting and I'm listening to Blink 182. So and those are some of my most romantic, lovely oil paintings. So it's just something that got me going. Yeah.
Okay, great. So tell me about the next opening that you have at the Art Center.
Yes, I do have something. We have openings every third Friday at the Joby Arts Center, and I'm on the 4th floor. And the next one is April 19th. And so I'll be there from 7 to 10. And it's an incredible night of art throughout the entire art center. We have multiple, 70 artists. I'm not even sure now, in galleries, and it's mind blowing how much art is there, and of different sorts too. So everybody can find something that they like, and there's free parking in the back.
There's lots of free parking,
which is pretty incredible for Chicago.
Where can people learn more about your artwork?
You can find me. The easiest way is just even Google Diana Leviton Gondek, or you can go to my website, DianaLevitonGondek.com.
Can you spell that?
Sure. It's DianaLeviton LevitonGondek. So that's, and then I'm also on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, not as much. So, but those are, and my work is also, I have public pieces throughout Chicago that you can actually go and see as well.
Okay, great. Are there any places in particular you'd like to call out?
Well, the ones I did one for the mayor of Chicago. So that I'm not sure what's going to happen to that one. That's in front of his office on the 5th floor. So Rahm Emanuel owns that one. I'm not sure if he'll be taking it with him or if it's going to go somewhere else. And then I have 2 more works for the alderman. One is for Alderman Burke in his 14th district. And then one is Alderman Tunney, which is at the 19th District Police Station. So that's very easy to see that horse when you go to a Cubs game.
Oh, okay. I know you did some work for the Special Olympics. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, it was coming for their 50th anniversary, which was last year. The first games were 1968, and so the celebration was actually last year, and I was commissioned to do a painting of the original founders and those now involved. And we did lithographs, and those were handed out to most of the people that were in the actual painting that I did. This was done in realism. And then the actual painting we have just recently sent to Tim Shriver in D.C. So now he owns it there now.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you today. My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.